Whether it's worth doing on balance, I'd come down on the side of saying, no, we shouldn't have been there. But I'm pretty, in short, I'm pretty optimistic about the Australian-American relationship. America needs quality friends, and I think we've made it clear that we're a quality friend. Even because under Kevin Rudd we're disagreeing with George Bush on climate change and on Iraq and a few other things, but doing so as a friend.
It's true, isn't it, that there is a certain irony in the fact that John Howard's relationship with George Bush has in turn helped strengthen the broader US relationship with Congress, and also, of course, the links between Prime Minister Rudd and President Obama.
Oh yeah, the people on the Republican side acknowledge that Australia was there, and that's of benefit to Australians seeking to be heard over there. And on the Democrat side, we're given credit for having changed our government, for having voted Howard out, and sort of prefigured the choice they made in their presidential election. So we don't really lose. We don't really lose. I think, by the way, that John Howard made a shocking error, and I can't understand why he did it, in attacking Barack Obama when he was running in the primaries. He said a victory for Barack Obama would be a victory for Osama bin Laden. Now that's an astonishing statement, and it makes me cringe with embarrassment. Fortunately, it's been forgotten by Americans, but it would have made the relationship a bit tricky had John Howard continued to be Prime Minister.
I recall President Obama himself early on in his campaign making some comments that he didn't have a great deal of knowledge about Australia. And of course there's the recent incident where the Howards effectively kept the Obamas out of Blair House during John Howard and his wife's recent visit to Washington. Do those sorts of issues have any sort of long-term damaging effect? I don't imagine they do, but from a political perspective?
No, they don't. He's got a very cheerful relationship with Kevin Rudd, and they see themselves as politically aligned, common positions, looking at the world. Australia's got access now. I think it's pretty healthy.
We touched previously on Iraq. Of course, this is one of the many issues, the Middle East generally, Afghanistan, terror, that Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State will have to deal with. You thought that she would have made a good president, but as we know, Secretary of State is a different job. We also know that Hillary Clinton is exceedingly ambitious. Do you think that the political marriage, if you like, between President Obama and Hillary Clinton will be a happy one?
It really is. It really is. It's a long time since you can say there's been a strong, effective Secretary of State. George Shultz, perhaps, under Reagan. The reason is that the President, out of the White House, tends to make foreign policy, and the foreign policy role gravitates to the White House. So he is a national security advisor, and as head of state, he's visiting heads of state. He has a strong foreign policy role, and that tends to, if you're dealing with another government, a sovereign government, and you want to have an impact in the United States, with the United States, naturally you value more your relationship with the President than the Secretary of State. So that is the difficulty, that is the challenge. And it's a long time. You've got to go back to Shultz before you can identify someone of whom it was said he or she was an effective Secretary of State. It's certainly not been said of Condoleezza Rice.
Do you have confidence, though, in Hillary Clinton being able to carry out her role? She's been described as not a great strategic thinker, but someone who does get things done.
She's tough, she's smart, she knows the Congress, she's charmed people on both sides of the Senate aisle. She knows world leaders. I've got confidence in her, yeah.
The seemingly intractable problem between Israel and the Palestinians. Hillary Clinton is seen as a friend of Israel. On the other hand, Barack Obama, as a black American, is possibly seen as someone who would be more understanding of the Muslim community. How do you see that playing out?
The problem we've got is we all know what the end game should be. The Israeli Prime Minister has spoken about a division of Jerusalem. Yasser Arafat was able to take out a street directory of Jerusalem, sitting down, having a chat with with Henry Kissinger long in retirement of course, and draw lines down the streets showing how Jerusalem could be divided. We know what the end game is. It's getting there that's a challenge. As Gareth Evans says, the former Australian Foreign Minister, now head of the International Crisis Group, what's needed is for all the parties to this to say, for the world leadership to say to the Middle Eastern parties, that's your end game, we're enforcing that settlement. The things that has complicated that is the rise of Hamas, and Hamas still being dedicated to principles of ongoing warfare and the destruction of Israel. Hamas not yet maturing into a peacemaking political force. That is the difficulty.
I have just a couple of more questions. In terms of Iraq, can Barack Obama successfully extricate America from Iraq? By that I mean, can the Iraqi government survive once the US troops are withdrawn? And in terms of Afghanistan, can he successfully deal with the situation there? Because it does look like it's becoming increasingly like a military quagmire.
I think the consensus seems to be one's got to be more pessimistic about Afghanistan. It seems the Taliban is going to prove much harder to beat. We can be more upbeat about what might happen in Iraq.
Finally, there's discussion from time to time about America's place in the world, that with the emergence of economic powers like China and India, that it will cease to be the world's leading superpower. But of course, the Americans have always shown a capacity to reinvent themselves. Looking down the track, where do you see America's place in the world?
I don't think you can subscribe to the theory of American decline. The evidence is not in. I mean, this century could continue to be the American century. There are real doubts about whether China has got the political flexibility, the cultural resilience to be what America has been. It took hundreds of years for the inevitability of the decline of the Roman Empire to become manifest. I mean, America could very easily have another 100 years of world dominance in it. And for most people, now that Bush has been removed, the most disastrous president in their history, that's probably a good thing.
Let's conclude on that point. Bob Carr, thank you very much for appearing on our program, being the first guest on Viewpoint.
Oh, great honour, Laurie. Many thanks.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Bob Carr, and I look forward to joining you again with our next edition of Viewpoint.